Hello, my name's the Doctor. You're watching Headley. Reverse the polarity.
In 1954, under the leadership of director Showa Honda, Japanese movie studio Toho released a film called Godzilla. In it, the titular monster, Godzilla, was awakened by hydrogen bomb testing and proceeded to go on a rampage across Japan, starting first at Odo Island, where the beast was christened its name by an old local legend, then onto Tokyo Bay, and in the centerpiece of the film, destroys Shinagawa. The beast is finally slain by a scientist called Dr. Shirazawa, who uses an experimental chemical weapon called the Oxygen Destroyer to destroy all living matter in the area. To ensure his weapon could never fall into the wrong hands, he gave his life in this process, dying with the beast and taking his knowledge with him to the grave. The film ends on the ominous note that if nuclear testing were to continue, the rise of a second Godzilla would be inevitable. And the next time, we wouldn't have Dr. Shirazawa's weapon to protect us. The original film is played seriously. They had a grim story to tell and they weren't going to let some questionable special effects or lack of time stop them. Godzilla's existence and resulting rampage was specifically done to mirror the destruction of Hiroshima and Nagasaki in the Second World War, some of which was a bit of a taboo to portray in media at the time. Even the skin of the monster was specifically designed to be reminiscent of those who were suffering from radiation burns. At the time, Tim Martin of the Daily Telegraph spoke of the film and said, "It is designed to shock and horrify an adult audience. Its roster of frightening images, cities in flames, overstuffed hospitals and irradiated children would have been an all too familiar sight for cinema goers of whom the memories of Hiroshima and Nagasaki were still less than a decade old." The film is regarded as one of the best ever by certain groups, and even if you do ignore all the deeper meanings it has and you focus just on the pioneering techniques that it used, it's still hard to disagree. Suitmation is the idea of taking an actor and putting them inside a scaled down version of the monster, which is usually made out of foam or rubber or something, was invented entirely for this film. It worked as a time-effective alternative to claymation, which was expensive, costly and very time-consuming, but it was the mainstream way of depicting monsters up until this point. It would go on to become a staple of Japanese cinema, and granted, even though it's been much more refined and polished now, it still owes its legacy to this film. Godzilla is an undeniable classic, and anyone with even a remote interest in kaiju movies absolutely needs to sit through a screening of it. When it came to releasing it in the US, the film was recut and retitled as Godzilla, King of the Monsters. And you can tell that with a title like that, a lot of the serious tone was lost quite quickly. They even actually went as far as to film new scenes with American actor Raymond Burr, who played the character of Steve Martin, who basically works as a reporter documenting to us, the stupid American audience, what's happening in the film. I would say that kind of dumbing down is unnecessary, but Americans don't even know what a philosopher is, so. That version of the film is fine, but if you want the true horrifically grim experience, you have to experience the original. And I prefer dub over sub, so that's saying a lot. Very quickly after the film was released, a sequel was rushed into production, and thus Godzilla became one of the longest standing movie franchises of all time. Although you can just absolutely start with the first one and then make your way through all of them, there's over 30 of them at this point. Some are connected, some aren't, some are good, some aren't, and it can be a little intimidating for a new viewer. So in this deep dive series, I'm going to run through every single universe and incarnation of Godzilla. We're going to break down that wall of intimidation for first viewers, and if you're already well versed in your G knowledge, then sit back and enjoy the show. We're starting off quite rightly with the beginning. The Showa series, which starts with the original Godzilla in 1954 and runs all the way up to Terror of Mechagodzilla in 1975. The first sequel, titled Godzilla Raids Again, Godzilla's Counterattack, or Gigantus the Fire Monster, hit cinemas only a year after the original film. Its premise saw a second Godzilla rising up and doing battle against another creature, another original kaiju, this time called Anguillus, or Anguirus. It's confusing. This marks the first time that the big G's ever fought off against another kaiju. They explain it as Anguillus is another creature from the same place as Godzilla. It's a bit inconsistent in these films about what exactly Godzilla is, where he came from, and what created him, but for now, just go with the assumption that Godzilla and Anguirus are both dinosaurs that may or may not have been created by nuclear radiation, but were definitely awakened by it. Film plays out pretty much by the numbers of the government trying to deal with these two fighting creatures, as well as the story of two pilots who were in the wrong place at the wrong time and got messed up in the whole lot. The entire series atmosphere is gone, and though it hasn't quite dropped into the campy tone of some of the films we're about to look at, the quality difference is stark. Frankly, the only other noticeable thing about this film is that when it was completely redubbed to America 4 years later, they didn't just completely redub it, they completely retconned it. That's where the title Gigantus the Fire Monster comes from. They completely removed Godzilla from the plot and tried to pass him off as a new monster called Gigantus. I was gonna speedrun it like that, but this jacket is hot, okay? It is summer outside. It is summer, and I have these two giant lights. I'm not doing that. You can bog off. If it feels like I spoke very fleetingly about this film and compared to the first one, then yeah, it does just have all the hallmarks of the film done to capitalise on the success of the first one. It did alright at the box office, but that's because it was a sequel to Godzilla. Critical reception was and still is pretty poor of it. Admittedly, this is just the one that everyone kind of skips. It's an okay film in its own right, but you don't need to watch this one. Continuity is a bit of a fickle thing between these films, and you absolutely can just breeze through it and pick out the ones that you want to watch and still understand them all perfectly. So after the public quite horrifically rejected Gigantus the Fire Monster, Toho realised that Godzilla was lightning in a bottle that couldn't be replicated. But maybe they could still do something similar. Kaiju movies could work, just maybe not as sequels to Godzilla. First of these releases was Rodan in 1956. Now I'm not being funny, I don't know why this film doesn't get more attention. Granted, it's not on par with the original Godzilla, few things are, but this film does a lot of things right. The entire first half of the film plays out like a mystery. The humans are dealing with these giant insects called Meganeuron, which at this point are being treated like they're the main monster of the film, but they're only just food for the real monster, Rodan. Rodan's a giant pterosaur who does the basic thing of waking up and causing destruction all across Japan. The only major difference between him and Godzilla in that respect is he was awoken by a mining accident, whereas Godzilla was awoken by radiation. They don't mention Godzilla or Anguillus at any point in the movie. I can only imagine this is because at this point they didn't know if they wanted the films to be connected or not. Rodan is awesome. His wings are that powerful that it just annihilates anything that he flies over, which is a fantastic way of raising the stakes. But there's also two Rodans in this movie. It's the first colour kaiju movie, and Toho even took a page out of King Kong's book and decided to portray these monsters in a more sympathetic, humanising light. I swear the ending of this movie has absolutely no right being as genuinely heart-wrenching as it is. How dare a film about men in big rubber suits make me feel this way? Absolutely watch this film. Unless you ever want to feel happy again, then avoid it at all costs. 2 years later, and it was a return to black and white, this time with Varan in 1958. This one got another American recut when it came over to the US, this time being renamed as Varan the Unbelievable. And to be honest, it is the most textbook version of Americanizing a Japanese film as you can get. They swap out the peaceful lab researchers for the military, and then the plot plays out much more like an American film made around the same kind of time would do. Its characters, setting and story beats actually make it have way more in common with, say, The Beast from 20,000 Fathoms or 20 Million Miles to Earth than they would do Godzilla. The forbidden amalgamation of man versus nature is something that the Americans were doing a lot of at the time, but this is kind of the most that Toho has stretched into it. Although I know it's not technically the same film anymore, now we're talking about the American re-edit. I do love it, probably more than the Toho version, but in a different kind of way to how I like the Godzilla movies at the same time. If you're looking for something different, watch this one. And bonus points for an interracial couple. You didn't get that kind of thing back then. Keeping with the subject of progressiveness, 3 years after Varan, we were introduced to the Queen of the Monsters, the First Lady Kaiju, Mothra. Mothra, or Mothra, was released in 1961. It was actually based on a book called Mothra and the Luminous Fairies. As far as I'm aware, it's one of the only 2 kaiju movies based on a book, which is a shame really, considering the material we have to work with. In this film, we are introduced to the Shobijin, these adorable little fairies who live on Infant Island, which, shocker, is being threatened by nuclear testing. Wow, it's almost like Japan has a stigma against it. The Shobijin want to stop the nuclear testing, the human characters want the Shobijin for profit, Mothra has to come save them. It's Mothra's one and only film portrayal as the antagonist, but even then she's still very obviously in the right. The filmmakers want you to root for her, and actually Mothra is the only monster to make it out of her titular film alive. Mothra wins, gets the fairies back and leaves humanity in peace. What a lass! Mothra for best girl? I think so. But now we are in 1962 and it's time for the king to reclaim his throne. In one of the most important cinema moves in history, we have King Kong versus Godzilla. Both monsters in full colour for the first time, just beating the crap out of each other for an entire film. Pure poetry. And thank God this film is decent as well. Again, the serious tone is gone, but what it's replaced with is enjoyable and watchable. So last time when we saw Godzilla, spoiler alert now, he was being trapped under an avalanche at the end of Godzilla Raids Again. And in a shocking twist of continuity, that's how this film starts. with him escaping from the iceberg. There's no mention of Anguirus anymore, and for some reason Godzilla has a adorable redesign, but don't look a gift horse in the mouth. It's certainly better than the suit Kong was given. So there's this corrupt business guy who wants his own monster. I don't know why that's a recurring plot in these movies, but he sends 2 of his employees to not Skull Island, not Infant Island, not Odo Island, but Pharaoh Island. They then find a bunch of the natives worshipping their god, Kong, and at this point the film kind of just plays out like a remake of Mary C. Cooper's original. Obviously this film doesn't sit in the same continuity as the original since they need to beef Kong's size up, and so at this point this section plays out like a remake, though just a bit more Japanified. Kong gets loose on the mainland, he gets superpowers, he puts a tree inside Godzilla. It's awesome. Watch this movie. Next film is regarded as one of the greats in the Showa era, but I'm maybe not so sure, but I'll get onto that. This is Godzilla vs. Mothra in 1964, also known as Godzilla vs. The Thing. Now, this is technically the first crossover film that Godzilla has been in. Remember when Kong showed up in the last one, that version of Kong hadn't been in any other movie before, whereas this film is a direct sequel to Mothra's. My complaint with this movie is it plays out too similarly to Mothra's original film. This time, instead of a corrupt businessman trying to use the Showa for profit and Mothra trying to get them back, it's a corrupt businessman trying to use Mothra's egg for profit and Mothra trying to get that back. The only difference is Godzilla, after surviving his fight with Kong, is now also here, also after the egg, presumably to eat it or something. Maybe he wants to put it on a show. Humanity is able to make a deal with Mothra and the Showa that basically, if she defeats Godzilla for them, they'll give her the egg back and then plot happens. To people that haven't had a chance to see her first movie, I'm sure this is a fantastic first introduction to the character, but to people that have seen it, it does just play out like a rehash with that, but now with Godzilla in. Watch it if you don't want to watch a solo movie, but why wouldn't you? She's best girl. 1964 marked the 10-year anniversary of the release of the original Godzilla, and keeping in spirits with that, it was a fantastic year for kaiju movies. We got Godzilla vs. Mothra, but then only 8 months after, we got a sequel. One of my personal favourites, Ghidorah, the three-headed monster. This film gets straight to the point. It picks up with Godzilla, now pride wounded after losing against Mothra, picking on a fight with the newly awakened Rodan. Side note, there's a bit of debate if this is one of these surviving Rodans from the Solo movie, maybe their offspring, or just a different Rodan entirely. I don't know, but in the same way that Godzilla vs. Mothra is a sequel to Mothra, this is a sequel to Rodan. Those two are off doing their thing destroying Japan, meanwhile Mothra, the larvae from the last film, senses there's something bigger going on and seeks to unite all 3 monsters against this bigger alien enemy. Last 3 monsters we've seen have all been from different properties, but now we're back to creating original kaiju again. King Ghidorah is badass. He is the arch-enemy of Godzilla. He's the Joker to his Batman, he's the Moriarty to his Sherlock Holmes, and he's the Joanne Rowling to trans people. In a way, you could argue that Godzilla King of the Monsters is a pseudo-remake of this film. It's the only film since this one to feature a lineup of all 4 monsters, and it uses Mothra in a similar role. This film sets the standard for what the rest of the series is going to be. It's not serious, but it's not trying to be. There's flying saucer people, mind control, and I'm pretty sure Godzilla calls Rodan the N-word.
Oh, Godzilla, what terrible language!
If you don't want to do your homework and you just want a film with all the monsters in, this one is my absolute most recommended. Consider it a must-watch. Next up is 1965's Invasion of the Astro Monster, and a lot of people like it. I personally don't have much to say about it. For me, it just plays out like a poor man's Ghidorah the three-headed monster. I'll explain. Godzilla, Rodan and Ghidorah are all back, but no one gave Mothra the memo this time, so automatically points down for not including the best girl. This film is a bit more out there with its plot compared to some of the others. We experiment with taking Godzilla off of Earth. We lend him over to the Exilian aliens, who are dealing with their own problem on Planet X. It's Ghidorah! We do this in exchange for some miracle drug that can cure all diseases. Obviously it's not as straightforward as that, another plot happens, but I don't know, for me it just doesn't do that much to differentiate itself from Ghidorah the three-headed monster, which is a vastly superior film. It is worth a look though. A lot of people regard Godzilla vs. Mothra, Ghidorah the three-headed monster and Invasion of the Astro Monster as the golden trilogy of the Showa era, and although I personally don't care for 2 of them, I wouldn't disagree. I was getting anxious, so I decided to double check. I've been calling it wrong the entire time. I've been calling it Godzilla vs. Mothra. It's actually Mothra vs. Godzilla. That sounds like a petty difference, but it makes a world of difference when you consider some of the other titles in the series. You should definitely watch these movies. After that, we have Ebirah, Horror of the Deep in 1966, which is continuing with the introduction of original monsters into the franchise. Now, if I'm being honest, at this point, I would struggle to tell you the plot, because straight up, it's just not one of the films that I watch a lot. Just like Godzilla Raids Again, this one kind of falls in between the cracks when talking about Showa movies. It's something about a terrorist group coming into contact with a native tribe of islanders. Which, hear me out, if you're going to tell that story after doing ones about aliens and mind control, then yeah, it's going to be a step down. That's not on me. The only reason anyone really bothers with this film is because it was specifically written first to be with Kong and then had to be replaced with Godzilla. And you can kind of tell Godzilla acts a lot more human in this, and he even has a lady love interest. Ebirah, or Ebora, I don't know. He himself is quite a cool villain. It's the first time and the only time Godzilla has ever gone up against a fully aquatic creature, which is cool in concept. Death Girl does have a cameo in it, which earns the film some points back, but then she doesn't do anything. There is also a giant condor in it that doesn't do anything, and then dies. Maybe it's underrated and deserves a rewatch, I don't know. You tell me. The next film is 1967, and we get Son of Godzilla. Consider this a bit of taste of what's to come. The film itself is decent, it's a bit more child-friendly this time, and the story hits a lot of similar beats with Ebirah Horror of the Deep just did. It's about a group of weather scientists, this time being harassed by more original kaiju, the giant mantis Karakarus and the giant spider Kumonga, while Godzilla and Manila kind of have their side plot going on at the same time. Manila is Godzilla's adopted son, and he has a bit of a bad reputation between fans because, look at him! He looked like the Stay Puft Marshmallow Man contracted grayscale. I'd say watch this film, but only if you're curious. But don't worry, because then, in 1968, Toho walked so that Marvel could run. They put in the work and they were ready to make themselves known as a cinematic universe with Destroy All Monsters. The distant future, the year 2000, the Keelak aliens have come to Earth and taken control of Monsterland, the sanctuary where all the Earth's kaiju have been kept. Godzilla, Mothra, Rodan, Ghidorah, Anguirus, Manila, Gorosaurus, Manda, Baragon, Kumonga, and Varan, all together in one epic, movie-long monster brawl. Except not really. Most of the monsters just have cameos in this film. It's a recurring thing with the Godzilla films, how painfully little screen time the monsters get, but this film suffers from it the most. It was planned to be the last Godzilla film, hence why they took it out with a bang and decided to bring in every single suit that they still had in storage. It is still good. No, it's genuinely one of the best in the Showa movies, actually. The fight scene at the end with all of the monsters ganging up on Ghidorah is genuinely awesome. We just needed a few more scenes like that in the movie. They also almost had Kong, Ebirah, and other Toho kaiju like Sanda, Gaira, and Maguma show up. And it's a shame that we didn't get them, but if we did, it probably would have just meant less screen time for the monsters that we already do have. The film, at its best, is a wonderful childhood fantasy come through, and at its worst, it is a sorry waste of potential. Take it for what it is. I personally love it, even if I am kind of waiting for the first half to hurry up so we can get to the ending. Look at it as the Godzilla version of Rogue One. It suffers from its own success. In that respect, it does deserve a watch, even if it is just the once. Then from glory to glory hole. In 1969, we got All Monsters Attack, also known as Godzilla's Revenge. This one will be the one that you've heard called the worst Godzilla movie. And that's saying quite a bit, considering there's well over 30 films in this franchise. How bad does something have to be considered the worst of the lot? Well, for starters, this film isn't even canon. I know canon's a fickle thing between these films, but it isn't even trying. It actually takes place in the dreams of a young boy. He's being chased by some criminals in like a Home Alone style thing, and then he imagines Manila as his best friend, who's also dealing with a kaiju who's bullying him called Gabara, who is one of the laziest... I don't want to talk about Gabara. Oh, and Manila can talk now. I'm not going to show you a clip of it, because it's weird, but yeah. Compare Son of Godzilla to the original, and you just get two different movies. Compare Godzilla's Revenge to the original, and it's just flat out insulting. If you want a so bad it's good movie, then consider this one for you. It's not unwatchable, but it is the absolute bottom of the barrel of Godzilla movies. Do not feel the need to watch this movie, lest it sour the lot for you. From one of my least favourites now onto one of my most favourites, after all monsters attack, Toho basically said, that was rubbish, don't do that. And so we got kind of a return to form here. The films that follow now are what's called the Champion series by fans. They basically work as a part 2 of the Showa series, with Destroy All Monsters being the ones that divide them in the middle, and just ignoring all monsters attack. It is still part of the Showa era, we just call it the Champion era because at this point in the films, Godzilla is just flat out a superhero, whereas in the previous ones he was kind of an anti-hero at best. So to kick us off, we have Godzilla vs. the Smog Monster 2 years later in 1971, and this film is so weird! It's live action, it's animated, it's gory, it's psychedelic, it is the most 70s example of a movie you could find. No Manila this time, thank God, it's just Godzilla, back and looking as adorable as ever, and he's going up against Hedorah, the pollution monster. I love Hedorah, he is simultaneously gross and beautiful, and he's actually the main point of the film. I know it may sound weird considering it's a monster movie, but it's a very recurring thing in the films up until this point, that the human action takes the forefront and the monster action kind of goes on in the back. Whereas in this film, Hedorah and his weird, ever-evolving life cycle is literally the first scene of the film and carries on the whole way through. It is a lot darker than some of the other movies, but a different kind of dark to the original. It's highly recommended if you're in the mood for something a bit different and a bit weird. In 1972 we get Godzilla vs Gigan, which sees the return of Ghidorah and Anguirus, who join in a tag team match against Godzilla and the titular monster, Gigan. Now, Gigan's a bit of a strange bloke. I feel that a bit of the Smog Monster leaked into the weirdness of his design. It's more aliens again, though this time from the Space Hunter Nebula M planet, and they've got a secret base on Earth which is disguised as a theme park, World Children's Funland. Some human workers find out that their plan is to use the theme park to lead Gigan and Ghidorah to Earth, and you can tell how the plot plays out from there. And I need to say it because it is incredibly jarring. In this movie, it is the only time that we hear Godzilla speak. In the Japanese version, it's just speech bubbles, but when they did the American redubbing, they flat out give him a voice. Visually, it is one of the prettier films, I have to say. I don't know if it's just my version of it that I have or not, but the monster action in this film is looking the most crisp it ever has. Not much else to say about this film. It is weird, but not quite as weird as Godzilla vs. the Smog Monster. Though there is definitely some questionable things done with it. Not one of the top choices, but there's definitely nothing wrong with it either. It's worth a look. The next falls into a very similar classification where it's not incredible, but it's certainly nothing bad either. Released in 1973, we have Godzilla vs. Megalon, which is a film where nothing happens for 90% of it. I know I've said that's a common thing with these films, but just like Destroy All Monsters, this one is a particularly bad victim of that. This time the monsters are Godzilla and Gigan again, we've also got two new monsters, the size-changing robot Jet Jaguar and the bug thing Megalon. The plot for this one is Monster Island has been destroyed by nuclear testing, and I think Anguirus and Rodan die? If it's that easy, why didn't you just do that in the earlier films? And then the Seatopians, who are a thing, apparently, they get unhappy with the way that the above-top humans are running the world, and so they send their god Megalon up to come sort us out. As I said, it plays out very similarly in tone to Godzilla vs. Gigan, and because of that, the two kind of meld together a bit in my mind. This one was actually heavily promoted in the West for some reason. It's probably why a lot of older audiences just know the Godzilla films as the big, dumb guy in rubber suit movies. Bit of context for what I'm about to say next. It's a very common thing that when moving a film overseas, you have to retitle it to kind of fit the foreign audience a bit more. Gojira becomes Godzilla, King of the Monsters. Varan becomes Varan the Unbelievable. It's not a lost concept. But then, please explain to me the unfathomable reason why when they released Godzilla vs. Megalon in Germany, they retitled it as King Kong vs. the Demons from Outer Space. I mean, Kong's one thing, but this is actually the only film that doesn't have aliens in it. Watch this film, form your own opinion, let me know in the comments. Other than that, bit of interesting history about the kaiju Jet Jaguar. He was actually the result of a competition by Toho for you to get your own monster design featured in the film. He also comes with a kick-ass theme tune, which obviously I can't play, but you definitely need to go open a new tab and go listen to it. It's okay, I'll wait. At this point, we're approaching the end of the Showa era, and we've got just 2 films left to talk about. According to an old Okinawa legend, a black mountain will appear above the skies, and 2 monsters will do battle for the fate of the world. What better way to end than with the beginning? Godzilla is back and he's destroying Japan, but that's not right. Godzilla's a champion now. He's just spent the last however many films going from the destroyer of worlds to the lesser of 2 evils, to the anti-hero, to the hero. What could have happened to make him turn on us so suddenly? It's not right, and we're not the only ones to think so. Anguirus was Godzilla's first foe and now his faithful ally. He shows up to find out what's going on, and the big G almost tears him a new one. Our armadillo boy barely escaped with his life. Humanity doesn't know what's going on, but something is very clear. This is not our Godzilla. We're in 1974 now, and this is Godzilla vs. Mechagodzilla, also known as Godzilla vs. the Cosmic Monster. Mechagodzilla is a robotic clone of Godzilla created by the black hole planet Free Aliens to try and divide and conquer Earth. This film is awesome. If it isn't already amazing seeing 2 Godzillas fight against each other, imagine the surprise as you're watching it and the real Godzilla ends up blasting away the skin of the fake Godzilla, revealing a metal endoskeleton underneath. This film, again, is a prime example of the Showa era at its best. It's fun, it's goofy, but surprisingly badass in times. It can be slow in time, sure, but the crazy fight scenes between Godzilla, Mechagodzilla, and King Caesar, the demigod kaiju prophesied to save the world, more than make up for it. Mechagodzilla also makes up the last of Toho's big 5 kaiju, which consist of Godzilla, Ghidorah, Rodan, Mothra, and Mechagodzilla as their go-tos. They struck gold with the character. Kids love Godzilla, and they love giant robots, and that's why this film often comes as a duo with its sequel, The Terror of Mechagodzilla. A direct continuation, the black hole planet Free Aliens are back and trying to rebuild Mechagodzilla with the help of the crazy scientist Dr. Mifune. Why is he crazy? Well, it turns out he had this idea that there was a giant monster living at the bottom of the ocean, and people didn't believe him? What, this is the 18th film that we've looked at and suddenly you need proof of kaiju? But whatever, Mifune helps rebuild Mechagodzilla, and now with the help of his kaiju, Titanosaurus, they both go for a rematch against Godzilla, who's just on his own this time. One can only presume that King Caesar was that impressed last time they met that they left him to himself to sort this one out. And by God, he bloody can. I really wish I could show a clip of this one, because I'm convinced that Godzilla's entrance into the Battle of Boston in 2019's King of the Monsters is a direct reference to his entrance in this film, but somehow this film does it even cooler. I'm not going to repeat the same joke I just did, but for God's sake, pause this video, go watch that. This film goes back to being a bit darker. It harkens a bit of the Smog Monster to that respect. And to be honest, it's actually my favourite of the 2 Mechagodzilla Showa movies, though both absolutely deserve a watch. Despite some ups and some downs, I firmly believe that the Showa era ended on the best high note that it could. So while that might be it for the Godzilla Showa era, I'm still not entirely done talking about the concept just yet. I should probably explain why it's called the Showa era. I don't entirely understand the concept behind it myself because I'm English, but the Godzilla film series are named after the periods in Japan that they were released in, which means Showa is much more of just a blanket term and isn't exclusive to Godzilla movies. There's actually a lot more kaiju movies that were made by Toho during the Showa era that I haven't been able to cover. I was just about able to cover Mothra, Rodan and Varan, but that's because they were made based on the success of Godzilla and did later cross over with him. As I already said, Varan the Unbelievable is fantastic, and it's a shame that Varan only shows up for a cameo in Destroy All Monsters. Honestly, he's probably one of my favourite kaiju. I just love the uniqueness of his design.
The Mysterians, or the Earth Defense Force, came out in 1957, and with Irasho Honda directing, Akira Ifukube scoring, and the leads from Godzilla also leading here, it's a bit of a pseudo-Godzilla reunion. The Mysterians themselves just look bloody brilliant. Look at them! Like the Stig at Brighton Pride. And they are here to fuck! No, that's actually the plot. They destroyed their own race, so they want Earth's women to repopulate their planet. They've sent down Mogira, their robot that they're using to burrow into the Earth to create earthquakes. But their reign of terror doesn't last very long, as the JSDF is, possibly for the first and very last time ever in one of these movies, able to dispatch Moguera with traditional weaponry. But this is just the first of the Mysterians' many weapons. The humans will only be able to defeat them if they can unite the whole world under one banner, combining their power and knowledge. Imagine Independence Day remade as an episode of Power Rangers, and you've got the Mysterians. For 1957, this looks fantastic. I like this one. Even if Moguera is the kaiju you only go to whenever Mechagodzilla is unavailable. In the distant future of the 1980s, a runaway star is on collision with Earth. Let me ask you something. Have you ever watched Armageddon or Deep Impact and you enjoyed it, but you just thought there was a depressing lack of giant walruses? Then this is the movie for you. This is Gorath, released in 1962, and it isn't a kaiju movie. Gorath, the asteroid in question, is not alive, although I do love the idea of a celestial body kaiju. No, instead the driving force in this movie is the Japanese opting to move the entire Earth out of orbit, and they plan to do this by constructing massive rocket engines pointing towards the sky in Antarctica. Sure, why not? No, it's not a kaiju movie, but we do have a kaiju in it. This being my main man, Maguma. He's awakened by the construction and, well, to be honest, is in the film for about 5 minutes. They kill him and then continue with the plot. So why have I included it in the list? Well, it's a bloody good movie regardless. It's tense, really utilising the fiction of science fiction, but because it takes its premise seriously, so do you, the audience. Maguma shows up in a bunch of other kaiju media, and even the Gorath asteroid returns to fight Godzilla later, so it's a film that at least deserves a mention. It can't take place in the same continuity as the rest, as at the end the moon is destroyed Dr. Robotnik style, and none of the other Showa movies make effort to keep this continuity, so it does stand aside from the rest. You can skip this one if you like, but again, it's got a giant walrus in it. Do I even need to say anything more? If you thought Gorath was a stretch, just wait until you see the hoops we jump through for this one. The year is 1963, and we are talking about the Hiroshi Honda directed Atragon, also known as the underwater warship. And it is mental. The ancient and long-forgotten Mu Empire has declared war on humanity and the surface world with their sea god Manda, and the only weapon powerful enough to stand against them is the super high-tech, ultra-powerful war submarine, the Gotengo. It's an ambitious premise, silly in many ways, but actually takes itself seriously, weaving in a theme about toxic nationalism with the character of Captain Jaguji, who created his warship for the Japanese military and will not allow it to be used for anything else, even when it's the entire world at stake. He's a relic from a bygone time, where serving your country was the highest honour a man can do. Hiroshi Honda is very diverse as a director. He can do horrific war allegories and campy fantasy adventures for kids. To someone like me, his best movies are a little bit of both, and that's why this one deserves a look. It's on Prime, and even had an anime in 1995. The Empire of Mu isn't exclusive to this movie. Along with Atlantis and Lemuria, it's often utilised in sci-fi, and even is actually the homeland of Gamera in his respective film series. And there's a lot of Jules Verne vibes here with the adventure, too. It felt like Toho's answer to 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea, though it was actually apparently inspired by a book called The Undersea Kingdom. Atragon and the Mysterians often come hand in hand. Both are extremely ambitious sci-fi fantasy stories, both feature kaiju that would later face off against Godzilla, and both disguise a political theme by wrapping it in a campy exterior. Now, I know it is a stretch to include Atragon in this retrospective about kaiju movies, since Manda doesn't really show up until the very end, and the focus of the story is definitely on the Empire of Mu and the search for Captain Jagunji. However, both Manda and even the Gotengo return in future Godzilla movies, so I'd say this is just about as valid as any of the others we've looked at. And that is not a bad thing, because this is a bloody fun movie. Not a bad one to include as part of your marathon. Understandable if you don't, but you won't regret it if you do. Next up is Dogra, also in 1964. Daikaiju cinema rarely strays into horror, and this movie definitely doesn't, but it is the creepiest imagery I've ever seen in a monster movie. Every shot of Dogra floating silently above the cloudy city just looks like a Renaissance painting. This is what I imagine the Dunwich Horror looked like. Have you guys ever heard of a phantom jellyfish? They are quite possibly the worst thing currently alive on the planet today. I hate even seeing pictures of them. Never mind if I woke up one day to see a giant one hovering over Manchester. In fact, if I had to compare it to any other movie monster, the closest you'd probably get is Jean Jacket from Nope. They both look like eldritch abominations and have an organic vacuum that they use to suck up prey, though Dogora seems markedly more intelligent. The plot isn't much to write home about, unfortunately. The creature descended from outer space in search of carbon, which it finds by feeding on diamonds and coal, while we're following a team of diamond thieves trying to get at the diamonds before they're eaten. It's kind of like a heist movie if you had to limit it to one genre. It's more street level than the other Showa movies we've looked at, and like Gorath and Atragon, the kaiju stuff takes a back seat to the human plot. You chuck Robert Eggers or Guillermo del Toro to direct a remake of this, and it may be the first movie to make a guaranteed Godzillion dollars. Next, we have Frankenstein vs. Baragon, or Frankenstein Conquers the World in 1965. This is another one where the development of the movie is arguably just as interesting as what's going on the screen. This had constant back and forths in the scripting process. It started off as King Kong versus Frankenstein, but not that Kong, as the original pitch came from Willis O'Brien, special effects genius behind the original 1933 movie. This would have seen Kong fighting a giant monster constructed by Dr. Frankenstein. Then they decided they wanted a bigger name to go up against Kong, and that movie became King Kong vs. Godzilla. Though the concept wasn't quite dead in the water yet, because Toho then wanted to do a Godzilla vs. Frankenstein film. And then further down the line they sacked Godzilla off and replaced him with a new monster, Baragon, who, rather appropriately, would go on to become a staple foe of his. By the end of it, we get a movie where the heart of the original Frankenstein monster is being pursued by the Nazis, only for it to end up in Hiroshima at the time of the atomic bombing. This causes the indestructible heart to mutate with radiation, and wham bam done, we have our giant Frankenstein monster. And before you say it, yes, they do just call him Frankenstein in this. It felt like Toho was watching Universal's endless string of Frankenstein sequels, with each one degrading in quality with each release, and decided they wanted a part of it. In fact, you could watch this as a sequel to those, and provided you ignore the obvious visual inconsistencies, this is the movie that made Boris Karloff's Frankenstein and Godzilla canon to one another. This is a good one, though often overlooked by its sequel, War of the Gargantuas, which we will get onto later, but for now it's just nice to see a genuinely human monster. In fact, does he even count as a kaiju? Actually, no. According to Wikizilla, human kaiju are called kaijin. The more you know.
Outside from the original Godzilla, War of the Gargantuans is probably the best Showa kaiju movie there is. Released in 1966, and this deals with the offspring of the creature from the last movie, though they've now been retconned into being gargantuas instead of Frankenstein creatures. One of the brothers, Gaira, is hostile towards humans and he wants to eat them, whereas Sandra, who was raised by humans, wants to live in harmony with them. As you can imagine, it escalates beyond a small disagreement and it becomes a full-blown War of the Gargantuans. It has the kind of film structure about it that I feel would make it very accessible by modern audiences. Although it might be cinematically dated, it's actually not that different to the kind of film structure that you'd see in a modern day film. Brad Pitt even said that it was one of his favourite films of all time, and what I would not give for a big budget Hollywood remake of this film. And side note, the physicality of the Gargantuans went a large way in inspiring the movement of the Titans from Attack on Titan.
The king is back, but probably not the one you're expecting. This is 1967 and King Kong escapes as the next movie. The evil mad scientist Doctor Who, yeah, really, has created Mechanicong to mine for Element X, but soon finds you can't send a bot to do a monkey's job, and the two clash. Originally, this was going to be a Kong vs. Ebra and Mothra movie, but Toei, long-time collaborator with Toho, was already producing a cartoon called The King Kong Show, which was very popular, so they decided to team up and make a movie adaptation of that. But they scrapped all the lore from the show and started afresh. Though they also don't fully commit to making this a sequel to King Kong vs. Godzilla either, as Kong is now on Mondo Island and Doctor Who and Mechanicon are lifted straight from the cartoon. But you can't make the argument this doesn't belong in the Showa timeline because, as well as the return of Kong, it also features the introduction of Gorosaurus, a kaiju who'd reappear in a few Godzilla projects. This guy is one of my favourites, by the way, because he's just a dinosaur. No alien or radioactive or mining project to beef him up, he was just born like that. And they even recreate the Kong T-Rex fight from the original. It's a strange one, but a great time. The American re-edit is actually quite an easy movie to come across in the West, so check this one out. Just a bloody shame about that monkey suit though. Especially when this is the last time we'll ever see a Toho-produced Kong, as after this the character's rights reverted back to RKO. We wouldn't see Kong go up against another kaiju again until 50 years later in Skull Island. Space Amoeba, also known as Yog, the monster from outer space, released in 1970, is a certified riot. Thank you very much. That's because it kind of represents a bit of a last hurrah for Toho's stray into big sci-fi fantasy adventure movies. In this respect, it's also more grounded than the others. There's no big military battles in this one, just a group of survivors trying to survive. Radiation infects a space probe, which returns to Earth and starts to mutate the animal inhabitants of the nearby Sugujo Island. This is getting out of hand now. I'm gonna have to start putting together some kind of map of these islands. You know, they're giving Jurassic World Rebirth flack for introducing a third island with dinosaurs on them. But this is what, the fourth, fifth kaiju worshipping island we've seen? It's easy to assume the headcanon that these are all just the same island. That's obviously not canon, but as I say, continuity is all over the place in these movies, so if you want to pretend it is, I don't think anyone's going to argue. And we've not got any returning kaiju in this, all originals and free for the price of one. We have Gazora, the cuttlefish kaiju, Kamabas, a mutated Mata Mata turtle, and Ganymes, the giant crab. The space amoeba itself is intelligent, able to possess both animals and humans, though it seems to be only able to mutate lesser life forms. This is the first step in its invasion to conquer Earth, thus kicking off a race against time for our heroes not just to survive the island's monsters, but also prevent the amoeba from reaching the mainland. Just look at this guy go. Oh, this came out in the 70s. There is no reason for this guy to look so bad. But Gazora is a piece of grit on the lens, though, as the effects in this movie are varied and hold up very well. If you want a single movie that entirely sums up the Showa era that isn't a Godzilla movie, this is your pick.
And so there we have it. That's my retrospective on not just the early Godzilla films, but the Showa era as a general. Coming out of all of that, my personal recommendation is the original Godzilla. The American recut also works, but if it's worth doing properly. The original is just on a level all its own. If you want my opinion based on sheer quality, I'd say watch everything, but avoid Godzilla Raids Again, Horror of the Deep, and All Monsters Attack. Not necessarily because they're bad, just because they're the least good of the lot. If you want just the highlights, consider this my list. After Terror of Mechagodzilla, the Big G went dormant for the next 10 years. And when we saw him again, gone was the cheesy and fun tone the Showa movies. We were back to the dark and gritty setting of the original nightmare.
The original Godzilla was a traumatic masterpiece. It wasn't for kids. It was a hardcore allegory for the side effects of nuclear war with tone and music that reflected that. But unfortunately, 20 years of light-hearted, child-friendly romps and Godzilla was no longer the metaphor for disaster that he started at. Now, he was a joke. After Terror of Mechagodzilla, the G franchise had gone stale, and Gamera, Godzilla's direct competitor, had his own line of sequels which... yeah, the kaiju genre had fallen into disarray. But Toho wasn't quite willing to let the franchise die out just yet.
They had an idea, an unpredicted one, but if it worked out, they just might be able to restore the franchise to its early days' glory. Hoping to win back adult audiences, Toho did a complete continuity reboot in 1984 with The Return of Godzilla, which was a direct sequel to the original. That half-an-hour video I did breaking down the long history of Godzilla movies? Irrelevant. None of that happened. A complete clean slate where the only kaiju related thing that's happened in this world was Goji's original rampage in 1954. We start things off 30 years later, and in quite possibly the most stereotypical way for a giant monster movie to begin, with a ship in a storm. Things go wrong and the ship sinks, but not without us hearing the familiar and yet strangely new sound of a beast long thought dead. The film temporarily becomes The Thing. See, the whole sequence of them investigating the boat is near identical to MacReady investigating the destroyed Norwegian camp. The music that plays in this scene I actually thought was from The Thing. You see, it was quite a common thing that when they came to redubbing the American movies, as well as just creating a new voice track, they would also insert themes from a lot of American films into the Japanese ones. The most obvious common example being the Creature from the Black Lagoon theme playing constantly in King Kong vs. Godzilla. But it wasn't that, just plagiarism. News of the ship gets back to the Japanese Prime Minister, and it is very quickly assumed that the day everyone has been dreading has arrived. Godzilla is back! Apparently, the JSDF had long theorized that another Godzilla would one day raise up, and has been preparing for exactly that. This is the first film to not actually feature Godzilla fighting another kaiju since the original, and only actually one of 4 ever. In place of kaiju, we have the Super X, an anti-kaiju weapon designed by the JSDF, and in a shocking twist of events, it actually works, mostly. Oh yeah, and we should probably talk about Godzilla. His design in this is a bit of amalgamation between the designs that we've seen in previous films and ones that we are about to see in the future. In the modern day, we are used to Godzilla being all badass and metal, but I guess after 20 years of child-friendly films, they kind of struggle to think how to do that. As a result, the design looks kind of strange, with big googly eyes and a double chin. They did give him back his fangs from the original, which I really like and I wish they would do more of in modern day films. This Godzilla is also twice the size of the last one, upping the stakes, and although they do give an in-universe explanation for this, the realistic reason is Tokyo as a city has massively increased since Godzilla's original rampage. And even this Godzilla is still dwarfed by the buildings around him. Seeing the original in this landscape would take away all seriousness as the film is trying to go for. You wouldn't even need the military, just send in our Gaz to sort him out. So, with all stakes resting on it, the question remains, was it a good movie? You have to look at that question in 2 categories. You have to look at it first as a sequel to the original Gojira, since it goes out of its way to focus on it being a sequel to it, but then you should also give it the fair dues and give it a classification standing on its own as just a movie. As a sequel, it's probably the best we're ever gonna get. Not as good as the original being a 10 out of 10, this one may be falling around a 6 or a 7, but it still qualifies for the running. A valiant attempt, but simply unmatched to the original, because it's the original. Looking at it as a separate entity though, fans don't really seem to like this one too much, and I guess I can understand why. The slow and serious tone of the original works because of the subject matter, but it's kind of a different case here. There's a big difference between Godzilla attacking a city full of innocents and seeing literal families with children die in front of your eyes, versus Godzilla just kind of existing in a big empty city while a homeless man runs around having shenanigans. Actually, no, I like that guy, okay? I respect the hustle. Adam Wingard, put him in the Monsterverse. And yes, at this point, the lack of a second monster does kind of make itself known, but I don't think that I'm bothered by this as much as other fans are. This isn't trying to compete with the monster actions of the other sequels, this is trying to replicate the darker tone of the original. I wouldn't say it entirely succeeds at that, but it is still nice to see people taking the big G seriously again. This film, like many others before it, also had an American recut, and this time the recut was sponsored by Dr. Pepper because, oh my god, there is so much Dr. Pepper in this movie! I just fundamentally disagree with trading away your artistic license for commercialism. What, just to get a few extra bucks? It's sickening. That's such a stupid joke. They also insert this weird, almost comedic tone, which feels really out of place and actually kind of cruel at times. But this edit becomes worthier than all those that came before it for one reason, and one reason only. While the Americans are running around making Dr. Pepper jokes and trying to pin the blame on the Soviet Union for some reason, one guy decides to bring in an expert. And it's only bloody Steve Martin. That's right, Steve Martin from the original American recut, with Raymond Burr returning to the role after 30 years. The scenes with him in it are the highlight and make the American cut worth watching on its own. He has this aged mysticism about him where he seems to know more about the creature and can understand it in ways unlike anyone else, which is ironic because usually that role goes to the elderly Asian man in most films like this. My favourite bit is right towards the end, and on a rather ominous note, he reminds the general in charge that the corpse of the original creature was never found, implying that this Godzilla could be the same one from the original Rampage. Now, we as the audience know the reason the corpse was never found was the skeleton completely disintegrated, but this won't be the first time they'll be tweaking that ending. When talking about these movies, I try to avoid giving spoilers if I can. I give rough plot outlines, but I leave bigger stuff like plot twists and character deaths for the viewer to discover for themselves. I'm going to break this rule now, however, and talk about the ending of Return, which has the JSDF successfully luring Godzilla into the mountains and setting off charges below him, successfully causing him to fall into an active volcano. The scene where he falls to his death is actually, unironically, really sad. He lets out this wail which is so unlike anything that Godzilla has ever sounded like before. He sounds in pain. He sounds, for the first time possibly ever, like a scared animal. It gives me shivers to hear it today, and was actually the first film to ever make me cry. But here's the big one. The film was a success, both critically and financially, and it proved to Toho that there was still some radioactive life left in this franchise just yet. This kicks off the period of Godzilla films we have come to know as the Heisei Era, which ignore the events of the Showa era and, again, are named after the period in Japan in which they were released. You might remember that there was some very loose continuity between the entries in the last series, but I am happy to say that the Heisei era abandons this tradition in exchange for more traditional movie sequels. The next film, 1989's Godzilla vs. Biollante, picks up immediately where Return ended, with Godzilla being trapped, dead, but not really, inside an active volcano. When making this film, they wanted to appeal to the spy movie genre, which was very popular making the rounds in the UK and America at the time, and as a result, this film plays out almost like a political thriller, which is an interesting take on a kaiju movie. In a nutshell, there's a bioterrorist organisation group that have rigged the volcano to explode and release Godzilla unless their demands are met. Sounds familiar. What are their demands? They want access to G. No, not that one. Or that one. Stop it! G cells are the DNA of Godzilla, recovered from his previous attack and are being experimented on to find out what it is that make Godzilla tick. Which brings us to the other main plot in this, concerning a scientist and his daughter who are working in their laboratory on G cells when they are the victim of a terrorist attack. The daughter was killed, but since then the father has been working to try and bring her back to life by combining her DNA with the G cells and also a rose for story reasons. Toho understood that a big failing of the last movie was a lack of another giant kaiju for Godzilla to duke it out with, and so the DNA tampering goes the way it always does in giant monster movies, and Biollante is born. She's a rose mutated with the cells of Godzilla, but also harbouring the soul of the scientist's dead daughter. I mean, I'll accept Gigan, so sure. Even massive improvement of special effects aside, Biollante is still unique for a number of different reasons. She's the only other lady kaiju, barring Mothra, and because she shares Godzilla's DNA, this would technically make her his half-sister. Or his clone. Evangelion much? If you like Godzilla portrayed in a more serious light while also having the kaiju action of the earlier films, you'll like this one. It probably has the best special effects of any Godzilla movie up until this point, and look at his design! This suit is nicknamed Bio-Goji by fans, and it is absolutely peak. Look at those thighs! And no word of a lie, a retro synth remix of Akira Ifukube's Godzilla March is in this movie. It is so distorted and over the top, it doesn't even sound like the theme. It is the least Godzilla sounding bit of music I could possibly imagine. I'm not going to play it because I like money, but I will wait here while you go away and play it for yourselves. Don't worry, I'll wait. A top tier movie. It manages to balance being dark with having great special effects, good action, one of the best ones you will see next. 3 years after Godzilla vs. Biollante, we have Godzilla vs. King Ghidorah in 1991, and man does it feel good to have a familiar name back. In fact, the whole tone of this movie is a massive throwback. It has aliens, it has time travel, it has androids. It is a Showa era movie, but done with the effects and budget of a Heisei Era film. This film works as a new origin point for Ghidorah, reintroducing him into the new continuity, and also is the introduction of Mecha Ghidorah. Oh yeah! At this point, getting a mecha version of yourself is basically a badge of honor for any kaiju. Mecha Mothra when? I want to talk now about a character called Miki Sagusa, played by actress Megumi Odoka. Miki is in all of the Heisei Era movies, barring Return, and she is the closest to a recurring human protagonist in the Godzilla series as we've ever had. She has very vague psychic powers, and can use them to not control, but maybe influence the decision making of the kaiju, and maybe steer them in the right direction. She was used in the last movie to try and contact the soul of Biollante, and she's back in this film to help out. She really doesn't get enough attention for her contribution to the series, especially since Anne Hathaway's Colossal is just a straight rip-off of this idea. Upon release, the reception for this film was now a bit more mixed. There were the kid fans who loved seeing Ghidorah again and thought it was an awesome movie, and then there were the adult fans who thought it was quite bad taste showing off as much as World War II as they did in the time travel segments, and didn't really care for the new retcon into Godzilla's origin story. And not to be a wet blanket, but I kind of agree with this assessment. Godzilla works best when you imply where he came from. Flat out showing that he was the last surviving dinosaur and then in World War II saved a battalion of soldiers and then got hit by a nuke and turned into a giant radioactive version of himself kind of just ruins the mystique around the character. Think of Godzilla like the Joker. You either tell the origin story really, really well, or you don't do it at all. Because it's what you don't know which is infinitely more terrifying. This film is absolutely mental. To sum it up anymore would be an injustice. Watch this one for yourself. Now, whether or not you like the campy tone of the last film, Toho clearly recognised that bringing back old familiar kaiju was the right way to go. An expedition into a cave reveals an ancient portrait showing two guardians locked in combat and a very familiar looking egg. This is Godzilla vs. Mothra, Battle for Earth in 1992. This film follows the formula being set up in the Heisei Era and reintroduces Mothra into this new continuity, but with a lot less deviations this time. Now, instead of having an unexplained origin, the Shobijin, who are back and looking, tell of an ancient civilization that polluted the Earth, and so the planet itself released an antivirus to combat it, an evil version of Best Girl, her evil twin, Batra. Mothra fought Batra in a biblical battle and eventually won. But now that Mothra's egg has been rediscovered, could this also spell the return for Batra as well? And where does Godzilla fit into all of this? He doesn't. And that's why it's so good. Mothra and Batra are the yin and yang of the Earth, but are both part of the natural order. They exist together, and only with both of them can there be harmony. Godzilla, born of nuclear radiation, represents the outside invading force, and thus causing yin and yang to unite together to battle and defeat Godzilla. Which they do, obviously, because Oh yeah, I haven't mentioned that yet, have I? That's right, Godzilla is the villain of this movie. In fact, he is pretty much the whole way through the Heisei Era. Early on in the Showa era, they experimented with the idea of Godzilla being an anti-hero, but this film perfects that idea. At no point in these movies will you find Godzilla being a good guy, but you will find villains that are infinitely worse than him. He is not humanity's protector anymore, but he can get extremely territorial when someone starts messing up his cities. And personally, that is Godzilla. I'm there for the Showa era because I love the campy tone and the men in rubber suits, but this is the best portrayal of Godzilla. A proper Godzilla. As I said, the Shobijin are back, though renamed to the Cosmos now for some reason, and Miki's role ends up falling mostly to them. She is still in the film, just a smaller role than usual. Not to get into fan theory territory, but I always got the impression that there was some kind of connection between Miki and the two fairies. Future Godzilla movies would lean into the idea of the Shobijin being actual people instead of fairies, and I kind of wish this had leaned into that. It's been 68 years and we've never got Mothra triplets, that's all I'm saying. Honest opinion now, although I am a big fan of the plot, the monster stuff I just don't find as good. You've got two basically identical and not very adapted for fighting monsters just rushing Godzilla the entire movie. I'd say it's actually better than Versus Ghidorah, maybe even on par with Versus Biollante, but it doesn't have the same kind of appeal that those films do have to me. But I mean, it's got Best Girl in it, so 10 out of 10, 100%, put it in the MCU. Despite being rushed into production immediately after the last film, this one fared a lot better with critics. It put the wind back in their sails enough to bring out another sequel 1 year later in 1993. This is Godzilla vs. Mechagodzilla 2. And yes, you heard that correctly. Despite all the pain and effort that they went through to create a solid and stable continuity throughout the films, they decided to title this one as though it was a sequel to Godzilla vs. Mechagodzilla. Which you have to understand, under no circumstance are these two films related. Heck, it's not even the second Mechagodzilla movie, it's the third one. Taking a move that Adam Wingard would steal 23 years later, but I'm not sour, the JSDF recover the body of Mecha Ghidorah and use it to create their anti-kaiju weapon, Mechagodzilla. That's right, no more aliens this time round. Isn't it weird the films get more grounded as they go on? They started with possession and aliens and time travel, and now they're going out of their way to make it more grounded and realistic. There's nothing stopping them from just creating Mecha G from scratch, but they went out of their way to be clever about it. I'm not complaining, I respect it, it's just a bit of a weird choice. And Mechagodzilla, let's talk about him. He's awful. I absolutely despise this design. I hate this man. Look at him, he's got a double chin. He looks like a fridge. Frick Mechagodzilla. Me and my homies hate Mechagodzilla. Luckily, he isn't the only returning kaiju we have this time. See, a mysterious egg has shown up on the shore of an island. Sound familiar? Well, sadly, no Best Girl this time, but we do in fact have Manila returning, or Godzilla Jr. as we're now calling him. Completely redesigned to actually look like a younger member of Godzilla species, his design is on peak, and he's the only one. See, this egg is what we call a brood parasite, which is a surprisingly common thing in nature, which is where essentially a pregnant female, for reasons that may differ, is unable to fulfill her role as a mother, and so sneaks her egg into the nest of a different species. To the owner of the nest, their parental instincts override their common sense and they don't notice. And you find some pretty funny looking family portraits in nature because of this. This is exactly what happens here, but the egg for Godzilla Jr. wasn't just in any nest. No, he was in the nest of the newly redesigned Rodan. So we have Godzilla, Manila, Rodan, and Mechagodzilla all back for the price of one. Godzilla Jr. is found, captured, and taken into custody where Miki raises him up herself to make him more docile and even pretty friendly. His film plays out like an episode of Jerry Springer, as you have Godzilla and Rodan fighting over the parental ownership of Manila, with the JSDF using Mechagodzilla to try and destroy them both. Yeah, Mecha G is a good guy this time round, being piloted by G-Force, a joint government organisation whose sole purpose is to combat the kaiju threat. Say what you like about Toho, but they are not afraid of switching a formula on its head. This is the one if you want nostalgia and action. It's fantastic. 4 stars, check it out. And now, we have seen cyborg space chicken Gigan and possessed plant waifu Biolante. But this next beastie takes the cake. In 1994, the world itself was brought to its knees by the might of Godzilla vs. Space Godzilla. I just love the thought process that they clearly had to go through to get to this one. We need to make Godzilla again, but this time we need to make him even better. Any ideas? Okay, hear me out, okay? Godzilla. Space Godzilla! My god, Marvin, you're a genius. Here, take my house keys, go home and f*** my wife. One of NASA's satellites gets destroyed and, well, actually, in fairness to them, they instantly assume that it was a giant monster. Like, seriously, thank you guys, it's only took 21 films. On Earth, we see Miki opening up a school specifically for similar kind of telepaths to her. And there's this one shot where you see her close her eyes, the camera cuts to Mothra, and it furthering that connection that I'm talking about with them. We see that in her movie, when Mothra retreated to space at the end of it, she took G-cells with her, which were then absorbed by a black hole, and then spat back out Space Godzilla. Neil deGrasse Tyson is quivering in his boots. And so now we have this giant, bizarro Godzilla with crystals for some reason. As a replacement for their destroyed Mechagodzilla, the JSDF has now invented the new Project Mogira. They send Mogira up to space to find out what destroyed the satellite, and he gets his ass handed to him by Space Godzilla. And now let's talk about Space Goji.
Why are you anonymous?
For some reason, upon immediately landing on Earth, he instantly captures Godzilla Jr., probably to lure Godzilla out or something. Why does he hate Godzilla despite just being born? Does he maybe have memories of once being Godzilla and wants to take his place as the real one? Or does he have Godzilla's bloodlust and wants to prove himself as the new king of the monsters? Sod it if I know, because they don't explain it. He's quite a good, intimidating villain, though. He's got a personal grudge against Godzilla, and though it's never really delved into why, it sets the stage for quite a fight. Very rarely does Godzilla actually have personal beef with the monsters that he's fighting. Oh yeah, and Godzilla Jr. is back, but no, God! This film is pretty insane. The concepts on their own are whack. But I mean, it's a Godzilla movie, so that's not really saying much, but they do a good job at taking the wacky stuff seriously. The music in this one is really good, but I mean, it's Akira Ifukube back doing all of the music for this, so of course it is. But Space Goji's theme specifically is something special. Absolutely god tier. And so then, after capturing Godzilla Jr., Space Goji and now we have the big one. Godzilla f***ing dies. Those were the headlines all over Japan, and it even made it on the news in America and the UK. Despite a string of very successful sequels, Toho wanted to bring the Godzilla franchise to a close, and so they wanted to end it on a bang. Literally, this was going to be the last Godzilla film, and they were not messing around anymore. This film kicks off with Godzilla glowing. Yeah, he's gotten way too powerful. This is Godzilla's burning form. His heart has reached the peak amount of radiation it can take, and is starting to melt down, Chernobyl style. Only this time, when Godzilla blows, he's taking the entire Earth with him. That is our premise, and we haven't even gotten to the other kaiju yet. This is 1995's Godzilla vs. Destroyer. Not Destroyer, you can't copyright this name. This is Destroyer! In 1954, Dr. Shirozawa used the oxygen destroyer to kill off the first Godzilla. But that wasn't the only thing that it did. Destroyer originates as a colony of Precambrian microscopic life forms that were living in the ocean when the Oxygen Destroyer hits. The colony mutated and began to evolve abnormally over the next 40 years, incorporating the micro-oxygen that killed the original Godzilla into their biological process. And after being disturbed by underwater mining, the creatures move onto the surface, begin feasting on organic organisms, slowly growing more powerful and combining together into bigger, deadlier creatures. So as Japan and the entire world is dealing with Godzilla going nuclear, you can imagine the last thing that they need is f***ing xenomorphs turning up. So Destroyer is the Oxygen Destroyer made incarnate. A rematch 40 years in the making. And with Godzilla in his suicidal, overpowered form, he might actually have a chance this time. Miki is back for one last run as well, now as a fully integrated member of G-Force. And you know, it really is tough to see her go from a well-meaning, optimistic girl at the start of the series, now into a hardened warrior. But that's this film for you. Destroyer seeks nothing other than the total and complete annihilation of all life forms in existence. This is war! I quite like this one, if I'm honest. Oh, you could tell? Good! This is considered one of the best, not just of the Heisei Era, but of all time. That much is universally agreed upon, with Destroyer being hailed as one of Godzilla's biggest bads ever. To use the example from my last video, if Godzilla is Batman and Ghidorah is his Joker, then Destroyer is Darkseid. And there we go. And yeah, spoiler alert, the king is dead. Long live the king. He dies, but his son lives on, at least leaving a small possibility of the door being open for more G movies in the future. Our ending shot leaves us as the sun rises from his father's ashes like a phoenix, and a heavenly glow comes in from behind. And that's it. I know, only 6 movies this time. It doesn't feel like a lot. But the reason why it's shorter than the Showa era is because, unlike that one, so much care, detail and attention was put into every second of these films. We love the Showa era because it's fun and camp, but these are serious viewings. My only gripe with them is actually exactly that. They can be a bit slow at times. When you don't have the wackiness of the Showa era, but still only show your monsters on screen for about 20% of the runtime, the end result is a film that can feel like it drags at points. Some do that more than others, but I can honestly say I don't think I've ever come away from a Heisei Era movie feeling unsatisfied. They redeemed the Big G in the eyes of fans and critics alike and restored him to the name of King of the Monsters. But enough about that loser, let's talk about the Queen of the Monsters! Yes, there's actually some stuff to say here. After Godzilla vs. Destroyer, Best Girl became one of the few monsters to ever escape the Big G's shadow and get to have a film series of her own. I'm talking about the Rebirth of Mothra trilogy from 1996 to 1998. These are composed of Rebirth of Mothra, Rebirth of Mothra 2, and Rebirth of Mothra 3. Filling in the Big G's role as the Earth's new resident monster hunter, we see Mothra facing off against subspecies of Ghidorah called Ghidorah and Cretaceous Ghidorah. We get to see Rainbow Mothra, Aqua Mothra, Lightspeed Mothra, Armored Mothra, ooh. We even get to meet Mothra Leo, her bloody son. Honestly, even putting aside my big Mothra bias, nearly said fetish then, my Mothra bias, it is good to see other G Kaiju getting this kind of attention. Keep in mind, these movies were made after versus Destroyer, and you could make the argument that these are better than some of his. The action's better, the special effects are better, the stories are wackier. But, unfortunately, outside from Mothra's trilogy and Godzilla's series, there wasn't too much going on the kaiju scene at this time. There was Kamen Rider, though that started in the Showa era and has just continued into the Heisei era. Same with Super Sentai, that show was the basis for Power Rangers. But in Japan, it was just another colourful tokusatsu show they had going at the time. Maybe I need to do a retrospective of TV shows about spandex heroes fighting Soup Nation monsters. And yes, before the kaiju weebs, queebs if you will, shout at me, I know I didn't mention the Gamera trilogy. What is the Gamera trilogy, I hear you ask? Look, no. If I'm talking about Gamera, I am going to talk about Gamera. And it's not going to be in a Godzilla video, okay? I'll give you that promise for the future. So, coming to an end, what do I recommend of the Heisei Era? Honestly, all of it. But if you just want the highlights, then I will recommend what I call the Origins trilogy. It's Gojira, followed by Return of Godzilla, and then ending with Godzilla vs. Destroyer. It's got a good 3-act structure, keeps Godzilla as the villain for longer, and maintains the Oxygen Destroyer as his big main enemy. It does create a few continuity issues, sure, like everyone just knowing who Godzilla Jr. is, but I believe it works as an overall. It would be a shame to miss out on monsters like Biollante and Space Godji, but as I said, this is just a cut down version. Mothra trilogy you can watch pretty much as sequels to the original Mothra, as they did a similar thing there that they did with Goji, and that's how I recommend watching them. And so, there we have it. Godzilla died, and then they never ever made another Godzilla movie ever again. Thank you very much for watching, and I hope you've enjoyed this strange delve into the Zillaverse. And if you haven't, I hope you have found it just the least bit interesting. I have been Hadley, and I shall see you next time. Cheers very much. Bye bye.